Welcome to the Barely Pregame Show. I am pumped for tonight. This is your host, Michael Halatek, joined by, as always, with my co-host, Ivan Vargas. Ivan, good evening, man.
Good evening, Mike. I'm ready for this game. It sounds like the Bears are going to be a little healthier. It sounds like they're running into the right opponent at the right time, but who knows? Who knows?
But unfortunately, we do have to talk about the debacle that was Tennessee. So start us off, Maestro.
Yeah, last week against Tennessee, it was probably the worst Bears. And you know what? The scoring at the end, it doesn't do it justice about how bad the play calling and just the overall play of the Chicago Bears was against the Tennessee Titans. They ended up, scraping up together some garbage yards and points at the end. But really, just the complete collapse of Matt Nagy's play calling was in full effect last Sunday against Tennessee. And I just felt every part of that game, I felt like the Bears were in it, but then they were just nowhere near being competitive in that game. It was, regardless of how the offensive line was in shambles, there was no adjustment to help your team. There was no adjustment to help your offense. Your quarterback was getting killed. And I get there was a lack of talent, but as a head coach, you have to be able to adjust your plays around your players' skill sets. You have to find a way to be successful with the guys you have on the team. And Matt Nagy just seemed to always want to plug in his guys into his roles, regardless of their talent, regardless of their skill set.
Yeah, so, as you mentioned, the final score was 24-17. But the score was nowhere indicative of the action on the field. The Bears were down, of course, 17-0 going into the fourth quarter. They did put up 17 points, as you said, but that last touchdown that the Tennessee scored was just too much for them to overcome. And it's just, of course, a lot of changes have happened between last Sunday and today, and we'll talk about them as soon as we're done talking about this game. But as you said, there was no rhythm on offense at all for three quarters. And if you follow me on Twitter at Texter420, you probably saw my tweet saying, now we know what rock bottom looks like, because that's exactly what we saw. This offense absolutely hit rock bottom.
And that's exactly what we saw out there. It was rock bottom. And, that and the pressure from the media, the pressure from the fans, the pressure all over the place for Matt Nagy to, concede those play callings to Bill Lazor, to anybody for that matter, DeFilippo, whoever. We're gone. It was being begged to just give up the play sheet and let somebody else have a go at it, because whatever he did, whatever he thinks his offense could be, it's either not that, or you just don't have the players out there with the play sets to run your offense. It's just point blank period. We just saw a inconsistent, sporadic type of offense from Matt Nagy. It was almost as if he was just grabbing plays that kind of sounds good, or we could just do this. That sounds good, we could do that. You can't just plug and play plays when you don't have players with the skills to run them.
Yeah, it is, and we're without Montgomery tonight, so he is on our inactive list along with Mitchell Trubisky, who might be done for the year with his shoulder. Sherrick McManus is still nursing a leg injury. Sam Mustaver is still out. Anthony Rush, John Jenkins, Travis Gibson. I believe Travis Gibson has been on the inactive list every single game so far. Minnesota's inactive just came out. So their defensive tackle, James Lynch, their tight end, Irv Smith, their defensive end, Jordan Brailford, linebacker Ryan Connolly, cornerback Cameron Dantzler, and wide receiver Tajai, I hope I'm saying that name right, Sharp, are inactive, but that doesn't account for a couple of, at least one offensive lineman that we know that got placed on their COVID list because they came down positive just over the weekend. So the Bears have an opportunity here to really do something. Minnesota Vikings are 3-5, but they've won 2 straight, including a game over the Packers in Green Bay, which surprised a lot of people. But Ivan, this is a winnable game.
It is. It is a winnable game. And, I understand that the Bears have won the games. Like I'll say this. Maybe they shouldn't have won 1 or 2 of those games at the beginning of the year, but they did. They did. They got to 5 wins. They beat look at what the Bucs are doing. Look at what the Bucs are doing. And look at how the Bears beat them. And the Bears don't have a great offense, and the Bears are still, able with that defense to find a way to beat Tom Brady and the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. And, for me, it comes down to the will of the players. It comes down to are you going to let the narrative be written for you for this season? Are you going to allow us in the media and people all around the country to just write you off, or are you going to find a way to step up? And it has to ring true throughout the entire team, throughout the entire locker room. Are you going to just let the narrative be written for you, or are you going to step up and find a way to win? I mean, that's pretty much that's it. That's the question that has to be asked. Are you going to let this be decided for you, or are you going to take control of this season of this team and find a way to win?
And I think they can. If you go back to last year, the Bears played in Minnesota the last game of the year, but a lot of their starters didn't play. So you got to go back to the game in Chicago that was played earlier in the year. But even then, the Bears didn't have Roquan Smith. He was out for the rest of the year. They didn't have Akeem Hicks. He was out for the rest of the year. Mm-hmm. They didn't have Quinn on the line like they do this year. Mack was playing hurt. But yet they sacked Cousins 6 times in that game. They forced 3 fumbles. They recovered 2 of them. They held Dalvin Cook to, I think it was 35 yards on 14 carries. Mm-hmm. So here's an interesting stat for you. You know what Dalvin Cook's average yards per touch in his career facing Chicago has been?
I'm going to give a guess. Average yards per touch, 2.75.
You're close.
Oh, all right.
I'm impressed. 2.9. He's under 3 yards per touch. That means receptions and carries. He's only 2.9 yards per touch against the Bears in his career since he's been in the league. So interesting. So that's what the Bears have to do. We'll get into the keys in the game in a little bit. Mm-hmm. But this is what's in front of the Bears. They dominated time of possession in that game in Chicago last year. I believe they held the ball for something like 35 minutes. And this is with Mitch Trubisky at quarterback. So it can be done. It can be done even, and with Foles under center and with a healthier line. You've got Whitehair back for tonight. You got Spriggs back for tonight. So that means you got Barrs probably moving over to one guard spot. You've got Coward probably moving over to one guard. Well, you got Coward will be out of the game.
If you have Spriggs on that right.
You got Ifedi at right guard. You got Barrs at left guard. You got Spriggs at one tackle, and you've got Leno at the other tackle. So that bodes well because the last thing we need to see is Rashad Coward back in the lineup.
Oh, that was an experiment from hell. I just want to let people know he has made no progress whatsoever at learning how to be an offensive lineman. I mean, I get what you're trying, you're athletic, you're able to do a lot of things. Maybe you're able to mock being an offensive lineman. Maybe you're able to be, put on this costume that you're an offensive lineman, but you are not an offensive lineman, sir. And it shows game after game. It shows he misses just key assignments, just basic stuff, basic things. Rashad Coward misses. So I'm actually excited to see this offensive line up this week, because I feel like this might right now give us the best chance to win.
We can only hope. So, I got fingers and toes crossed right now for tonight's game. I actually have the Bears. We'll get over this. We'll get into this at the end when we talk about our picks. But the Bears are actually 3-point underdogs to Minnesota, and the only reason they have to be underdogs is because Las Vegas hates the Bears.
Right.
B, the Vikings beat the Packers. They've won 2 straight, where the Bears have lost 3 straight games. So they hate the Chicago Bears, but they love Chicago Bears fans' money. So I expect the Bears to come out pretty aggressive in tonight's game. So I'll tell you what, why don't we take our break to hear from our sponsor, Tick Splits, and then we'll get right into the keys to the game.
Sounds good.
I just heard my favorite band is in town. I'd love to get good seats, but everywhere I've looked, the ticket sites have crazy service fees.
Haven't you heard of Tick Splits?
Who?
Tick Splits. They don't gouge you with crazy fees. The price they advertise is the price you pay, plus a small delivery fee.
Never pay service fees again. Go to TIXBLITZ.com today. TickSplits.com. Guaranteed seats, low prices. That's TickSplits.com. Every ticket, every venue, everywhere.
And if you're watching on YouTube, make sure you throw out some comments, and we can maybe take a look at some of them while we're in the second half of our show. Ivan, before we get started, you and I are starting a new venture. Now this has been going on since May of 19. I've been hosting a podcast called the Halatek Hall Show, which is a play on the Bears headquarters, Hallis Hall. And my previous co-host is the one that came up with that name. But we're going to be going live. Thank you to SportsZone Chicago, starting Wednesday at 7 o'clock. And our first guest is going to be none other than Lester Wiltfong, who is the editor-in-chief of Windy City Gridiron. And throughout the course of our weekly show, we'll get a lot of the writers from Windy City Gridiron, Bear Report. They're all going to be Sports Mockery. They'll all be on our show, and we're excited to move this to a live streaming format. You can catch it in 3 spots. You can catch it on YouTube, on this very channel. You can go to, if you're a member of SportsZone Chicago, you can catch it on their Facebook page. You can go to facebook.com/Halatek Hall and catch it there. So we're really excited about bringing this to the live stage on Wednesday evenings. And by the way, with Tick Splits, if you use promo code BEARS, BEARS, all in caps, you will save 5%. Because the owner of Tick Splits happens to be a huge Bears fan, and you never pay a service fee with TickSplits.com. So, Ivan, tonight's a big night. This is definitely, we've talked about must wins for a couple of weeks now, but they have a bye next week. They can get some guys healthy and get them back in time for their Sunday night game against the Packers, in 13 days. But here's how significant tonight's game is. If the Bears lose, they're a game out of last place. If the Bears win, they're a game and a half out of first place. And with the Green Bay Packers struggling against Jacksonville, of all teams, I believe they have to play down in Indianapolis, which is not going to be an easy contest for them to play down in Indianapolis, and they might just be looking ahead to the Bears for the following week because they know how big that matchup is going to be. So imagine going into a win tonight, a bye this weekend. The Bears will then play 4 out of their last 6 games inside the division with a chance to really make a statement.
Yeah, this is no game to take lightly. Even though we've pointed out why the Bears should win, and I think that they should win decisively. I wouldn't say that they're going to run away with it, but they should win decisively. I feel like this is where you start. This is where you start to make that change, where the tide turns. All the cliches you want to think of, because this goes into the meat of the division. This is where the division play starts, and I don't care what your record is against outside opponents. If you could run the gauntlet in that division, you're looking pretty. You're sitting pretty in a playoff spot. You're either going to be number 2 or number 1 in that division, and still you are going to have a good shot at making a playoff.
Outside of their division opponents, they play both games against Green Bay. They play both games against Minnesota. They have one game left, but it's at home against Detroit. The only other 2 games they have are both AFC South opponents. It's Houston and Jacksonville. So both those games are winnable. So this game really sets the table for the last 6 games after the bye week. So the keys to tonight's game, what are your keys for tonight's game, Ivan?
Oh, we'll go with mine first? All right. My keys is, number 1, it'll be protect the football. Nick Foles, there was just that one interception against the Saints. There was a fumble last week against the Tennessee Titans that was taken back for a touchdown from by Desmond King of the Titans. That can't be. Both those turnovers are game changing. If you really think about it, you have the Titans game where if he doesn't, pick up that fumble and go in and score, this is a 17-17 game. Going into the fourth. Now that final drive by the Bears isn't non-significant. Insignificant because you're right there. You have a chance to tie the game. But as far as tonight goes, you don't want to give a old, beaten down Vikings defense any type of gifts to get them back in the game. You want to run them down. You want to take your shots deep, and you really want to impose your will if you're able to. And like I said, we don't know what we're going to see with Bill Lazor, but after seeing Matt Nagy, the unknown is better for me at this point. Number 2 would be get the ball out quickly. We know the offensive line is tattered. We know that they're beat up. You need to find a way to get that ball out of Nick Foles' hands, because he is he has cement feet. He has cement shoes. He can't really move. He's not very mobile. But if he's able to consistently hit open targets quickly, I think the Bears might fare well in that short passing game, especially. And number 3, the defense needs to come up big. They need to have some turnovers. I need sudden change. You've missed a few opportunities. One in the Rams game that I thought with Gibson, Tayshaun Gibson, went up with one hand, didn't go up with 2 hands, trying to with any intent of intercepting that ball. And then you have Roquan Smith in the Saints game. You had a shot to for a pick 6, Roquan. You have to make the play. You have to make the play. And I think if that defense is able to make 1 or 2 sudden change plays, either a pick, a fumble, or what have you, I think the Bears come out victorious.
Yeah, you go back to the Carolina game, and the Bears, that's exactly what the Bears did to open the game. They had a sack, which put the ball inside the 5-yard line, and a couple of plays later, the interception that set up the Bears for an easy score to Cole Kmet. And the Bears went on to eke out a victory in Carolina. Exactly what you were saying earlier is keeping the ball away from the Vikings tonight. Go back to the New York Giants game where the Bears had they had all the momentum. They were ahead 17-0. They let up a late score at the end of the first half. Trubisky threw a terrible pick in the beginning of the third quarter, and all of a sudden, New York's right back in the game. So you're absolutely right. My keys to the game is, number 1, containing Dalvin Cook, and they've done a good job in his career facing the Bears. He's been limited to only 2.9 yards per touch since he's been in the league against the Chicago defense. Last year in Chicago, He had 14 carries for only 35 yards. So we need to see more of the same and make Cousins beat you, because if you make Cousins beat, they don't have Diggs any longer, and he was their number one receiver. And you might see a couple of interceptions because our defensive backs have been playing lights out just about all season long. We need to pick on the Vikings cornerbacks. They're young. They have not had much of a pass rush. They've put pressure on, especially on third downs. So stay out of third downs, especially third down and longs. And in number 3, they must develop a rhythm on offense. Bill Lazor has taken over play calling. So, my little tag was laser focus.
Right.
They've got to develop a rhythm offensively, so they can stay balanced and keep on the field. And then last but not least, and this is what I put as 3A, score early. If the Bears can get up on Minnesota early, they're not built to come from behind. So those are my keys to tonight's game.
Yeah, I mean that sounds about right to me. I think we're our thoughts are aligned with that.
And for those of you that are joining our show for the first time, Ivan and I live about 120 miles apart, and we don't script this before the show. It's all live. It's all coming to you right now. We don't rehearse this beforehand, so it's amazing how Ivan and I, we've had a couple of differences throughout the year, but we've been pretty much in lockstep. Tonight's History Corner. This is a fun one for me because I was a season ticket holder back in the 70s. So I saw most of Walter Payton, his entire career up through the 85 season. And in 1977, Walter Payton ran for almost 1,900 yards. He was the MVP of the league. And on November 13th and November 20th, back-to-back games in Chicago, Walter Payton put together his best 2 consecutive games that not only of Walter's career, but I don't think I can ever remember another running back having such a prolific 2 weeks. And you go back to the week prior to the game on the 13th, the Bears were in Houston and got absolutely destroyed by the Houston Oilers. And they were 3-5 to start the year. And this is the last year of the 14-game season. The Bears were playing the Kansas City Chiefs in Chicago. It was a terrible day, windy. And the Bears, kind of like this year, they fell behind. It was 17-0 at halftime. And Walter Payton put the team on his back. He ended up running for 192 yards, 3 touchdowns on 33 carries, and the Bears took the lead against the Kansas City Chiefs 21-20 with just over 2 minutes to play. But Kansas City went straight down the field and scored with less than a minute to go in the game to take a 27-21 lead. And somehow Bob Avellini threw a touchdown pass to Greg Latta. Caught it over his shoulder in the left portion of the end zone to the south, and the Bears kicked the extra point with 3 seconds left to win what I think is the greatest comeback in Bears history, at least the greatest comeback in any game I was ever in attendance at. They ended up winning 28-27. The following week is the game that everybody talks about, and that's Walter Payton breaking, at that time, O.J. Simpson's single-game rushing mark of 273 yards. When he carried the ball 40 times for 275 yards, the only touchdown the Bears scored that game. And as I had mentioned to you earlier, Ivan, and you kind of came back, it was actually a run around right end late in the fourth quarter that got him close to the record, and then he broke the record a couple of plays later as they were trying to feed him and get him the ball They ended up going forward on 4th down and didn't score. But long story short, 270 yards on 40 carries, 1 touchdown. So, I mean, just take a look at that. That's 467 yards and 4 touchdowns in 2 games. And the Bears ended up winning both of those games.
It was simply amazing. And we actually got a clip of that 1977 game against the Minnesota Vikings.
Now it's 2nd down, 8, the Bears at their own 32-yard line. They give to Walter again. Breaks to the outside of the 40, to the 45, the 50, the 45, the 40. He's down the 5-yard line. He's got 2 men to beat, and he gets 5 and a 10 and out of bounds. Walter Payton watched them from going all the way. Nate Blake finally came over from an angle that just field. Left. 4th down, goal from the 6-yard line. Deuce backfield. Avellini to Payton on a sweep to the right side. Needs a block. He cuts back into the 5 and struggles down to about the 2-yard line. Well, there's the rushing record. Walter Payton becomes the all-time single-game rushing leader in the NFL.
Yep. It was that last carry that gave him that record. Absolutely. And if you go to YouTube and type in Bears versus Chiefs, you all have seen the run where Walter Payton bounces off of about 6 Kansas City defenders, and he gets tackled from behind inside the 5-yard line. Jim Brown once called that the greatest run he had ever seen. That's the game that was 1 week prior to this one where he ran for the 192 yards. So that's our history corner for this evening. I could talk about Walter Payton for an entire show. So last but not least, the pick is in. So Ivan, you changed your pick. So why don't we talk about that for a little bit? We were so disgusted earlier in the week that you actually had Minnesota winning tonight's game.
Yeah, it was just frustrating for me to continue to watch Matt Nagy's offense, and just hear him in the press conference continue to feed us the same old lines. And we're like, dude, we see your offense out on the field. We see how it's been playing. It's been 2 years of the same runaround type of stuff, the same sporadic offense, this BU mentality. We don't even know who you are. We don't know who this team is as far as their identity on offense. And for me, I just feel like the Bears were in a bad position last week. I understand with the offensive line, but it was the perfect position to exploit Matt Nagy and the way he coaches. Like it's been said time and time again, he doesn't coach it to his players' abilities. And it finally caught up with him last week I understand that you have trouble with your offensive line, but, a sign of a good head coach is getting the most out of your players, no matter their skill set. So my frustration was around Matt Nagy last week. And this week, I feel change was necessary. And maybe you see a different attack. Maybe they keep the Vikings off balance, because now you're going into a divisional game where you're not familiar with this offensive coordinator's play calling. Maybe it helps the Bears, maybe it doesn't, but I do got the Bears winning this after I had them getting blown out earlier in the week. But I have the Bears winning this 27-20.
I am more optimistic in the Bears defense than you are, Ivan. The Bears historically have played the Vikings absolutely tough as nails in Chicago. So I have the Bears winning 27-10. And one thing that you mentioned is about the scheme, and here's what I'm hoping to see tonight. Because what we've seen in the past in all of the Bears writers, we talked about some of them earlier today, Lester and Jacob, at Windy City Gridiron, and Zach at BearReport.com. Their biggest complaint is Nagy coaches his scheme, and he expects his players to fit the scheme. What Laser needs to do tonight and going forward is scheme to his players' abilities and let them flourish with what he can call based on their abilities so they can flourish under this system.
I think that's absolutely right. I just hope I hope we see a fight. I hope we see a fight in this team, because if they take a loss here and it's 4 in a row, kiss to see, we're going to be talking about a funeral next week.
So if the Bears are 5-4, and if Minnesota wins tonight, both the Vikings and Detroit have 5 losses, so they would be even in the loss column. How sad is that?
It's really not. I mean, if you look at how they've played, how they've been playing the last couple games, they've had a chance to win in each of the last 3 games, and you have to. It comes down to this: bad coaching. The team has been out coached all season long. It's come down to bad coaching.
So just so I got this clear, I'm looking at NFL.com. And right now, the Packers are 7-2, and they're 2-1 in the division. The Bears have only played 1 division game. The Lions are 4-5, but they're 0-3 in the division. If the Vikings win tonight, they're 3-1 inside the division, and they'd have a 4-5 record. So that's how important tonight's game is. So hopefully Wednesday at 7:00, when Ivan joins me for the very first time on the Halatek Hall Show, we'll be joined by Lester Wilfong from the Windy City Gridiron, and we'll be able to talk about a Bears victory, and they'll only be a game and a half behind the Packers heading into their bye week. With that, I'm your host, Michael Halatek, with my co-host, Ivan Vargas. Bear down.
Bear down, guys.
I just heard my favorite band is in town. I'd love to get good seats, but everywhere I've looked, the ticket sites have crazy service fees.
Haven't you heard of TixSplits?
Who?
TixSplits. They don't gouge you with crazy fees. The price they advertise is the price you pay, plus a small delivery fee.
Never pay service fees again. Go to TIXBLITZ.com today. TixSplits.com. Guaranteed seats, low prices. That's TixSplits.com. Every ticket, every venue, everywhere.